Hi there. In this lecture, Mikhail Tal is playing against Mikhail Botvinnik in round 19. So Tal kicks off with c4. We have a Dutch defense from Botvinnik, knight f3, knight f6, g3, g6. We go into the Leningrad variation of the Dutch with this g6. Black fianchettoing here. Now after bishop g7, d4, d6, knight c3, e6. Both sides castle, queen c2. Looks to strike out with e4 here. Soon, knight c6, rook d1, queen e7, rook b1 as though b4 is of interest, and then maybe b5. That's stopped, a3, knight d8. We see e4 now, f takes, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, queen takes e4. So out of the opening, white does have a potential target, the e6 pawn. Pressure on this same open file. We see now a very interesting move, bishop h. After queen takes e4, pardon me, we see knight f7, but now a very interesting move, bishop h3, immediately targeting the e6 pawn. At some neglect a little bit, you might think, on the f file, because black does have the same open f file. We see queen f6, bishop d2, and here d5 is played. It seems like quite a committal move. It is based tactically on h3 being actually possible, with this bishop eyeing h3, x-raying h3. So for example, well, queen e2 was played, but c takes d5, e takes d5 is a problem for white. The queen is attacked and h3 is attacked from the bishop. So, what would white do here? Queen takes, we just lose the bishop. So, in fact, queen e2 is played, and black does take the pawn on c4. And now Tal plays a constraining move, bishop f4. He's not in a hurry to win this pawn, but if he does, there's another penalty. Queen takes f3 in any case. So, he can't be in a hurry to take the pawn. So we see bishop f4. Now knight d6 is played. This is an interesting situation. Can black actually hold on to this pawn? It seems as though b5 might have been a good move. So for example, knight e5, g5, and if bishop g2, rook a6, if knight g4, queen e7, it seems as though black can actually get an advantage here by playing like this. If instead black plays g5, white can just take on c7, or e5, this should just be equal, this position, after bishop takes c8, knight takes f3, queen takes, this is about even. So yes, there was a tactical move, it seems, b5, which seems as though black could have held on to a pawn there. Very interesting stuff. But knight d6 was played, and now we see knight g5. In fact, white does have a dynamic option here. Even though, okay, the knight's holding c4, white has a very dynamic option available instead of knight g5 in the form of b3. This pawn sacrifice after rook takes b3 means that the rook could actually be involved in pressurizing e6, that central focus here. So for example, queen e7, rook e3, knight f7 taking on e6, ends up with white having strong pressure, and it's being better here. This is just better for white in this position. It's difficult with the bishop eyeing c7. What does black actually do? If b5 is the best, this little trick for queen a1 check if knight takes, but white can just bypass that, and white ends up here in a very, very interesting situation where overall white has significant pressure, and he's doing very, very well here. But knight g5 was played. We have rook e8. There was an interesting move, bishop h6, which may be best. It looks very strange in a way, but if bishop takes e6, it ends up just being about equal here. So for example, queen takes, rook takes, this is about equal, this scenario. White has maybe a small advantage, and that's it. But rook e8 was played, and the bishop now drops back to g2. We see rook a6, and now knight e4. So this is kind of dismantling, trying to dismantle the pawn chain, or the c4 pawn in particular. Knight takes, bishop takes, and now b5 is played, still holding on to c4. And it's here that Tal actually does use the b3 button to undermine. We see c takes, queen takes b5. So black's pawns maybe are about to be split up, and they are here after queen takes b3. So the pawns are split into two islands there, and a third island in the centre, and then this island. So there's 4 islands in total if you think about pawn islands. In terms of the piece responsibility having to look after pawns, it can often tie down pieces defensively. So to speak of pawn islands, that's the real kind of impact. The pieces, what happens to the pieces? Do they become passive? But black has rook b6, a forcing move. Queen e3, an exchange of rooks. Bishop takes b1, holds d4 still. Bishop b7. Now bishop a2 back to torturing e6. And it leads to more simplification. Bishop d5, the bishops come off. We have now taking this pawn. So finally, in the game, white is actually a pawn up after all that. Rook c1 was also interesting. White should have an advantage here. Example, queen takes d4, queen e6 check. Rook takes c7. Even though white's not a pawn up, this is dangerous. So if queen takes, there's bishop e5. So this is kind of weakening black into 4 pawn islands again, essentially. It's a very tactical thing to do, though. But white has a big advantage here to exploit. So bishop takes c7 was interesting, though. We have a4, rook d3, queen f5, bishop e5. It's still very good for white here. Bishop h6, queen e2, rook c8, and now very interesting, rook f3, inviting, it seems, a really dangerous move, queen h3, taking out escape square. So in principle this looks like a super dangerous idea. What on earth is this about? Because isn't this rook also in the wrong place for this back row? But there's a fantastic resource in this position which must have been foreseen by Tal. So for 1,000 points, can you work out what that is? Because otherwise this position is looking diabolical. But there's a way of squishing out the counterplay in an unexpected manner. So what does white play here, you think? Okay. Bishop c7, it's an interference move. It's also a kind of line opening for things like queen e8 if there's a weakness of the last move, queen e8. But also, queen b5 is going to be dangerous, looking at d5 sometimes, and e8. So it opens up a number of possibilities and shuts down the opponent's c-file. We have bishop f8. So just to put a few things on the board, if rook takes c7, queen e8 check, and if king g7, queen f8 is checkmate. If queen d7, the bishop can drop back now that the queen's vacated h3. The king can go to g2 potentially, if needed. But say this continuation, this is going to be good for white as well. It's a bit of a grind needed there from there. So okay, we have bishop f8, and now, yeah, a very tactical move is played here. So for 100 points, what would you play here? Queen b5, looking at d5. We have queen e6. If rook takes c7, queen takes d5 check, the king would have to go basically onto a dark square, and then the rook gets picked up on a dark square with advantage for white. So queen e6, bishop e5, queen c6. Here, if rook c1 check, then king g2. This situation is in white's favour. For example, here, white can take on a4, and it's in white's favour. A lot of work to do still, perhaps, but overall it's in white's favour. So we have queen c6, queen a5, rook a8, queen d2, rook c8, king g2, queen d7, h4, queen g4, and actually Botvinnik's team may have resigned overnight. It's with this move that black actually resigned. So, okay, white is in the driving seat here, a pawn up, and has a dominant outpost square, that bishop on e5. So, yeah, the Botvinnik team resigned. Let's have a look at a fictional continuation. If white wants advantage, let's start with queen d3, and let's say queen e6, and let's say rook f6, and then using this f file. So we've made progress, at least fictionally. So if rook d8, because otherwise if the bishop moves, we've got things like rook d6. And here we can start putting pressure on a4. This could be a very, very good plan, but this is all fictional. And white can end up chipping away in this endgame. And in this fictional endgame, say we did get this fictional endgame, you know, white's going to be better with, this is just an example way of playing it. White could eventually, even if the a pawn is not successful, it could be used to get a pass pawn on the other side of the board in some scenarios. So for example like this, with a pass pawn on this side of the board, and that'll be winning clearly. But yeah, that's all pretty fictional. Yeah, it's a kind of a generous resign, perhaps, not playing on, just wanting to save energy. Perhaps start preparing for the next match, the next year, because Botvinnik knows he's got a rematch for sure, guaranteed, against Tal, and maybe even the next year. So, okay, so queen g4 and resigns. So, an interesting game. There were some moments there of tactical interest. Black clinging on to a pawn for a moment, then it was undermined. So white got the advantage in the end. Bit of a grind game. Not the most spectacular game for me in the match, but still, there were spectacular moments within this game, so you can't say the whole game is unspectacular. And for me, a key favourite moment is the bishop c7 move, because it seems a bit kind of strange how Tal invited the queen in here to cut escape squares with rook c1 being on the cards. This is just a fantastic move to rely on bishop c7. So that for me is the star move from the game. So even if there's no major takeaway, or maybe this represents clever ways of suppressing counterplay, need to be investigated sometimes if you want to have pressure points on the opponent's pawns. Maybe that's the one takeaway. But yeah, this is star move of the game for me, this bishop c7. So I hope you enjoyed the game in certain moments at least. Okay. Thanks very much. Hi there. Thanks for getting to the end of the YouTube video. If you would like to see other Mikhail Tal games, I actually have an amazing course for Mikhail Tal, which is currently at 4.9 with over 400 students. You can check this out from the Kingscrusher TV page. So Chess Strategy and Tactics, Mikhail Tal's amazing games. You can check out some free preview videos as well here. If you do expand all sections, you can see the preview links to get some free previews. So I hope you do check out this course index and the free previews. So I really had a thrilling time actually checking out Mikhail Tal's games. So yeah, the YouTube video here you saw was just a sample from this course. I hope you check it out. Okay, thanks so much. Oh, by the way, comments, questions, likes, shares, all appreciated. And if you did get to this part of the video, please do leave some sort of comment like Tal fan. Okay, thanks again.